The holographic display flickered with a grotesque ballet of destruction. Planetary systems, once vibrant worlds teeming with life, now appeared as nothing more than smoldering gray husks against the infinite backdrop of space. Jack Harrison stood motionless, his weathered hands clasped behind his back, muscles coiled with a tension that threatened to snap at any moment. Around him, the Galactic Confederation's Emergency Council chamber buzzed with a peculiar mixture of fear and bureaucratic detachment. Holographic representatives from 100 different species flickered in and out of existence, their translucent forms a testament to the technological marvel that allowed this desperate meeting to occur. To Jack's left, Ambassador Cathax from the Zoralian Diplomatic Corps adjusted his iridescent exoskeleton, mandibles clicking with nervous energy. The insectoid diplomat's multiple eyes darted between the destruction map and the human representative, a mix of contempt and barely concealed terror etched across his alien features. "Gentlemen," Jack began, his voice a low growl that seemed to cut through the ambient noise of translation devices and nervous murmurs, "we're running out of time." The Confederation's lead strategist, a crystalline being named Lux-9, responded with clinical precision. Preliminary analysis suggests a 78.3% probability of complete galactic subjugation within the next solar cycle. The being's crystalline form refracted light in hypnotic patterns, betraying no emotion beyond pure mathematical calculation. Jack couldn't help but laugh, a sharp, bitter sound that caused several delegates to flinch. It was not a laugh of humor, but of pure, unadulterated frustration. "Probabilities," he muttered, just loud enough for the nearby delegates to hear. "We're talking about the systematic elimination of entire civilizations, and you're discussing probabilities." The chamber fell silent. Ambassador Cathax leaned forward, his segmented body creating a rustling sound that echoed through the chamber. "The human representative seems agitated," he announced, his translator rendering the words with a clear note of derision. Several other delegates nodded or made equivalent gestures of agreement. Jack knew exactly what they saw. Another emotional human, unable to control his base instincts. To them, he was a walking stereotype, a representative of a species known for its unpredictability, its raw emotional output that seemed so primitive compared to their own carefully modulated responses. What they didn't see was the lifetime of military strategy behind those intense green eyes. What they missed was the calculated fury that had kept humanity alive through countless challenges. Jack Harrison was many things, but stupid was not one of them. The holographic map continued its grim display. Red tendrils, each representing the path of destruction left by the mysterious attackers, spread like a cancerous growth across the galactic cartography. Entire star systems winked out of existence, their light extinguished forever. "We need a proactive response," Jack declared, stepping forward. His military dress uniform, a stark contrast to the ethereal and bizarre attire of the other delegates, seemed to ground the room in a harsh reality. Lux-9's crystalline form pulsed with what might have been interpreted as mild irritation. "Proactive responses have been calculated and determined to be ineffective. The probability of successful resistance is—" "Probability," Jack interrupted, his voice rising. "We're talking about living beings, civilizations, entire species on the brink of extinction." A murmur went through the chamber. Some delegates shifted uncomfortably. Others seemed fascinated by the human's outburst, a rare moment of genuine emotion in a realm typically governed by cold calculation. Ambassador Cathax clicked his mandibles. The human shows exactly why his species is not trusted with significant strategic decisions. Emotional, unpredictable, dangerous. Jack met the insectoid's gaze. There was something in his eyes, a promise, a threat, a glimpse of a capability that the other species could not yet comprehend. "We're also the species that has survived every challenge thrown our way," he said quietly. The holographic map continued its silent testimony. Red tendrils of destruction, dying stars, vanishing civilizations, and in the middle of it all, one human, angry, determined, and ready to fight when all others had given up hope. The research center hummed with a quiet intensity that belied the chaos brewing beyond its walls. Holographic displays cascaded around MRIs like digital waterfalls, each projection a fragment of a complex puzzle that only she could see. Her fingers danced across multiple interface panels, leaving trails of light in their wake. Coffee mugs, some half-empty, others forgotten entirely, created a landscape of caffeine-fueled dedication around her workspace. Photographs of lost colonies lined the walls, each image a silent testament to the lives already consumed by the mysterious aggressors. "Come on," Emma muttered, her voice a low growl of concentration. "Show me what you're hiding." For weeks, she had been tracking the seemingly random attacks of the unknown force. To the rest of the scientific community, the strike patterns appeared chaotic, a random dispersal of violence without discernible strategy. But Emma saw something different, something underneath. A younger researcher, Michael Chen, approached cautiously. "Dr. Rice, you've been at this for 72 hours straight. Maybe you should rest." "Not now," she cut him off, her eyes never leaving the holographic display. The map before her was a nightmare of interconnected data points, star systems, communication relays, resource-rich planets, all marked with a complex web of red and blue lines. Each line represented potential attack vectors, resource dependencies, strategic choke points. Most researchers would have seen nothing more than a confusing mess of information. Emma saw a language, the language of invasion. She zoomed in on a seemingly insignificant star system near the galactic rim. Most scientific surveys had ignored it as a barren collection of dead planets and minimal resources, but Emma's analysis revealed something else entirely. "It's a communication nexus," she whispered to herself. "Not a resource center, a communication hub." Michael leaned in, confusion etched across his face. "That system. But the spectral analysis shows." "Disguised," Emma interrupted, deliberately made to look unimportant. Her fingers flew across the interface, pulling up layers of data that most intelligent systems would have overlooked. Microscopic variations in quantum communication signatures, subtle gravitational anomalies, electromagnetic interference patterns that seemed random but followed a precise mathematical progression. "They're not just attacking," Emma said, her voice gaining intensity. "They're systematically eliminating communication infrastructure." The implications were staggering. This wasn't simple conquest. This was a carefully orchestrated plan to isolate and divide potential resistance. Outside her research center, the night sky of the human colony world burned with the light of distant stars. Each pinpoint of light could be another system already lost, another civilization about to be erased from existence. Emma pulled up historical invasion models, comparing them with the current attack patterns. Her database stretched back thousands of years. Human conflicts, alien conquests, strategic studies from every known civilization. Most researchers would have used standard computational models. Emma had developed something different. An adaptive predictive model that didn't just calculate probabilities, but understood the psychological and strategic motivations behind conflict. "Michael," she said suddenly, "pull up the quantum communication intercepts from the last 3 destroyed systems." The young researcher hesitated. "But those were completely destroyed. There shouldn't be any." "Just do it," Emma commanded. As the data streams began to populate, a pattern emerged. Subtle, almost invisible, but there, a communication signature that didn't match any known species or technology. Emma's breath caught in her throat. "They're tracking something," she whispered. "Not just conquering. Hunting." The holographic display shifted, lines of potential attack vectors reorganizing themselves. What had looked like random destruction now revealed a hunting pattern. Precise, calculated, terrifyingly intelligent. Michael stared in shock. "How can you see this? This looks like chaos." Emma finished his sentence. "To most researchers, yes, but chaos is just a pattern we haven't understood yet." She knew what would happen when she presented these findings to the Galactic Confederation. They would laugh. They would dismiss her, another emotional human, seeing patterns where none existed. But Emma Reyes had never been one to back down, and what she had discovered was about to change everything. The first warning came as a whisper, a microsecond pulse of quantum disruption that went unnoticed by most communication arrays, but not by Emma Reyes. Her fingers froze over the holographic interface, a chill running down her spine. Something was wrong. Across the research center, warning sirens began to pulse, soft at first, then building to a crescendo that seemed to vibrate through the very foundations of the building. Michael Chen looked up, his face pale. Emma. Before she could respond, the first planetary feed collapsed. The Verdant Cluster, a collection of 3 heavily populated systems known for their advanced agricultural technologies, simply winked out of existence. No gradual destruction, no drawn-out battle, just silence. Billions of lives. Gone. In the Galactic Confederation's Emergency Command Center, Jack Harrison watched the holographic display with a horrifying clarity. The red tendrils of destruction spread like a cancer across the star map, each point of light representing entire worlds, entire civilizations, simply erased. Transmission from the Verdant Cluster. A communication officer called out, her voice trembling. It's not possible. Jack stepped forward. Report. The officer's hands shook as she replayed the final transmission. A cacophony of desperate voices, scientific alerts, and background noise resolved into a single chilling message. They came from everywhere and nowhere. The transmission cut to static. In the human research complex, Emma was already in motion. Her previous predictive models now looked like child's play compared to the unfolding horror. Michael, she called, her voice cutting through the chaos. I need full quantum communication analysis. Now. Across human colonies and research facilities, a transformation began. Where other species were already drafting surrender protocols, humanity shifted into a gear of pure, focused determination. Military bases that had been on standard alert now blazed with activity. Experimental weapon systems, projects that had been hidden away, deemed too radical or controversial, were being dusted off and prepared for deployment. Jack Harrison received a secure communication from the human military leadership. No long speeches, no bureaucratic nonsense, just a simple message. Mobilization protocols activated. Awaiting your command. Back in the research center, Emma's team worked with a fury that defied conventional scientific method. They weren't just analyzing data, they were hunting for the underlying pattern, the fundamental weakness in this seemingly invincible attack. Look at the quantum signature, Emma muttered, her fingers flying across multiple holographic displays. It's not random. Nothing is ever truly random. Michael found something. A tiny discrepancy in the destruction pattern, so small that it would have been overlooked by any conventional analysis. Emma, he called, there's something here. Outside, the first human response fleet began to assemble. Not the carefully maintained diplomatic vessels of the Galactic Confederation. These were purpose-built machines of war, adaptable, unpredictable, designed by minds that understood that survival sometimes meant throwing out every established rule of engagement. Jack Harrison stood in the command center of the primary response fleet. Around him, a team of strategists and military leaders worked with a controlled intensity that would have seemed impossible to their alien counterparts. They think we'll panic, Jack said quietly, more to himself than to anyone else. They think human emotion means weakness. A tactical officer looked up. Sir, prepare experimental quantum disruption protocols, Jack ordered, and get me a direct line to Dr. Reyes. In the research center, Emma was already one step ahead. The destruction of the Verdant Cluster had confirmed her worst fears and her most critical hypothesis. They're not just attacking, she told Michael, her voice low and intense. They're searching for something. The star map continued to pulse with points of destruction. 3 systems already gone. How many more would follow? Humanity was awake, and they were done being victims. Jack Harrison's voice came through the communication system, calm and determined. "Tell me everything you know." Emma's eyes burned with a mixture of fury, determination, and something else, a promise of retribution that no alien species could comprehend. "We're going to find them," she said, "and we're going to make them regret ever targeting our galaxy." The weapons development facility looked nothing like a traditional military complex. Nestled deep within a classified mountain range, it pulsed with an energy that defied conventional understanding of engineering and design. Dr. Marcus Rodriguez stood before a holographic display, his hands moving with a dancer's precision. Around him, a team of engineers, programmers, and theoretical physicists worked in a state of controlled chaos. Each workstation was a universe of its own: quantum computing arrays, adaptive neural network interfaces, and prototype systems that would have been dismissed as science fiction mere weeks ago. "We're not building weapons," Marcus announced to his team. "We're building solutions." The primary display showed a complex schematic that seemed to defy the laws of traditional physics: adaptive resonance systems that could change their fundamental quantum signature faster than an enemy could track them, computational systems that learned and evolved in real time, drawing from a vast database of strategic scenarios. A young engineer named Sarah Chen approached, holding a prototype that looked more like a piece of abstract art than a weapon. "Sir, the quantum dissonance generator is ready for initial testing." Marcus studied the device. It was small, no larger than a standard datapad, but the computational power contained within its crystalline structure could potentially disrupt entire communication networks across multiple star systems. "Our enemies believe in rigid systems," Marcus explained, more to himself than to anyone else. "They understand predictability. We're going to give them anything but." The facility hummed with a unique energy. These weren't just weapons of destruction. They were tools of adaptation, of survival. In a sealed testing chamber, a prototype adaptive combat system came to life. Unlike traditional AI, this system was built on a radical new approach: an emotional intelligence algorithm that could process strategic information through a lens of human intuition and creativity. Jack Harrison watched the preliminary tests from a secured observation room. Next to him, Emma Reyes analyzed every microscopic detail of the system's performance. "It's not just about processing power," Emma said, her eyes never leaving the display. "It's about understanding motivation, intention." The combat system demonstrated capabilities that would have been impossible with traditional computational models. It didn't just calculate probabilities. It anticipated. It didn't just respond. It predicted. A holographic simulation showed the system adapting to multiple attack scenarios. Where a standard AI would follow predetermined protocols, this system invented entirely new strategies on the fly. It learned. It evolved. It felt. "Emotion is not a weakness," Marcus said, joining Jack and Emma in the observation room. "It's our greatest weapon." Outside, the first fleet of adaptive combat vessels began their final preparation stages. These weren't standard military ships. They were living systems, each vessel capable of real-time reconfiguration, of learning from every microsecond of engagement. The quantum dissonance generators were just the beginning. Adaptive camouflage systems that could alter their fundamental molecular structure. Communication disruptors that could introduce calculated chaos into enemy networks. Weapons that were more like living organisms than traditional military hardware. Jack studied the deployment plans. "They won't understand us," he said quietly, "and that will be their greatest weakness." Emma nodded. "Unpredictability is our nature." In the weapons development facility, Marcus Rodriguez continued to refine the systems. Each prototype represented more than just technological innovation. They were a statement, a declaration that humanity would not go quietly into the night. The young engineer, Sarah Chen, brought up a final set of computational models. "Sir," she said, "the adaptive response matrices are showing something unexpected." Marcus leaned in. The display showed a series of potential engagement scenarios that seemed to defy conventional strategic thinking. responses that were simultaneously defensive and offensive, approaches that would appear completely illogical to a purely computational system. Exactly, Marcus smiled. We're not playing by their rules anymore. As the first wave of adaptive vessels prepared for deployment, humanity stood at the precipice of a new kind of warfare. Not a war of brute force, but a war of adaptation, of creativity, of pure, unbridled potential. The universe was about to learn what it meant to face a species that refused to be defined by anyone's expectations. The Psychological Warfare Center looked nothing like a traditional military installation. Nestled in a converted research complex, it buzzed with an energy that was equal parts scientific precision and raw human creativity. Emma Reyes stood at the center of a massive holographic display, her fingers dancing across quantum communication interfaces that seemed to bend reality itself. Around her, a team of linguists, cognitive scientists, and communication specialists worked with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Language is more than words, Emma explained to a group of young researchers. It's a weapon, a living, breathing system of manipulation and understanding. The primary objective was unlike any previous psychological warfare strategy in galactic history. They weren't just trying to break enemy communication. They were attempting to understand and subvert an entirely alien communication network. Dr. Michael Chen, a cognitive linguistics expert, brought up a series of complex communication models. Their network isn't just a transmission system, he said, pointing to intricate holographic representations. It's a collective consciousness, integrated, rigid. Emma's eyes narrowed. Rigidity was always a weakness. The team had developed a series of communication infiltration protocols that defied conventional understanding. These weren't simple translation algorithms or communication disruptors. They were adaptive linguistic viruses designed to introduce nuanced emotional complexity into a system that understood only pure logic. Watch this, Emma said quietly. A demonstration began on the primary display. A series of communication signals, seemingly random at first, began to weave a complex pattern. To an outside observer, it would look like nothing more than statistical noise. But to the right kind of intelligence, it was a precise, calculated assault. The signals introduced microscopic variations, emotional resonances, hints of doubt, subtle suggestions of internal conflict that would be imperceptible to a standard communication analysis. We're not breaking their network, Michael explained. We're infecting it with humanity. Jack Harrison watched from a secured observation room, a slight smile playing across his weathered features. The alien command structures believed they understood humanity. They saw emotion as a weakness, a flaw to be eliminated. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The first test results came in. The communication infiltration protocols were working beyond their most optimistic projections. Where traditional communication disruption would create clear, detectable interference, these signals did something far more insidious. They introduced uncertainty. In the Psychological Warfare Center, a young communication specialist named Rachel Torres pulled up a series of decoded transmission fragments. It's working, she said, her voice a mixture of excitement and disbelief. They're beginning to question their own communication protocols. The alien communication network, previously a model of perfect, logical integration, began to show microscopic fractures, not breaks, not destruction, something far more dangerous, doubt. Emma studied the developing patterns. Emotion is a complex system, she explained to Jack. Most species see it as a simple binary, positive or negative, but human emotion is a quantum state, constantly shifting, unpredictable. The communication infiltration was designed to do more than just disrupt. It was meant to introduce a fundamental uncertainty into a system that had never encountered true emotional complexity. We're teaching them what it means to feel, Michael said quietly. Jack nodded. We're showing them that logic has limits. The holographic displays continued to pulse with increasingly complex communication patterns. What had started as a precise, calculated assault was becoming something else entirely. A conversation, a challenge, an invitation to understand a fundamentally different way of experiencing existence. Rachel discovered something unexpected in the communication analysis. The variations, she said, her voice rising with excitement, they're creating new communication pathways. It's like we're teaching them to dream. Emma smiled. This was more than a military strategy. This was first contact of the most profound kind. Humanity's greatest weapon, she said, watching the holographic displays dance with possibility, has always been our capacity to adapt, to feel, to understand. The Psychological Warfare Center continued its work, quietly, precisely, introducing a revolution in communication that would change everything. The universe was about to learn that emotion was not a weakness. It was a superpower. The first engagement defied every known principle of space warfare. Jack Harrison stood on the bridge of the command vessel, his posture rigid but his mind fluid. Around him, the ship's systems pulsed with an almost living energy. Adaptive, responsive, nothing like the rigid military vessels of other galactic species. Incoming enemy fleet, the tactical officer reported. Her voice was calm, almost clinical. Standard projection models suggest complete destruction of our forces within 7 minutes. Jack's response was immediate. We're not using standard projection models. The enemy fleet approached, a perfect geometric formation that spoke of mathematical precision. Sleek vessels that moved with algorithmic perfection, each ship an extension of a collective intelligence that had conquered hundreds of civilizations. They had no concept of what was coming. The human fleet didn't meet the enemy in a traditional battle formation. Instead, they seemed to dissolve, individual vessels breaking apart, reforming, creating patterns that made no logical sense to a computational targeting system. Emma Rice's psychological warfare protocols went into full effect. The communication disruption waves they had been carefully developing now transformed into something far more complex. It wasn't just about breaking communication. It was about introducing pure, unpredictable chaos. Each human vessel became a node of adaptive intelligence. Where a standard military would have a rigid chain of command, these ships operated more like a living organism. They communicated not through traditional communication channels, but through a complex web of quantum resonance that shifted faster than any tracking system could follow. They're trying to understand our pattern, Jack observed, watching the tactical display. But we don't have a pattern. The enemy fleet's first wave of attacks passed through spaces where human ships had been moments before. But those ships weren't gone. They had simply redefined the concept of spatial positioning. A young tactical specialist named Rodriguez reported with a mixture of excitement and disbelief. "Sir, their targeting systems are completely compromised. They're firing at computational ghosts." Jack allowed himself a slight smile. Exactly. The psychological impact was immediate. The enemy fleet, so used to perfect, predictable responses, began to show signs of computational stress. Their formation started to break down, not through direct destruction, but through something far more insidious: uncertainty. Emma's team had introduced something the enemy had never encountered: the concept of doubt. Each human ship was more than a weapon. It was a living hypothesis, a challenge to everything the enemy understood about warfare, about intelligence, about existence itself. They didn't just fight. They evolved in real time. A massive enemy dreadnought, a vessel that had been the centerpiece of 100 successful conquests, found itself targeting multiple human ships that seemed to exist simultaneously in different spatial coordinates. Its computational core began to overheat, struggling to process the impossible data. Emotional complexity is our weapon, Emma had explained during the mission briefing. Now that theory was becoming devastating reality. The human fleet moved like a living storm. No predictable approach. No standard attack vectors. Just pure, adaptive creativity. Jack watched as entire sections of the enemy fleet began to break down. Not through physical destruction, but through computational exhaustion. Their systems simply couldn't process the level of unpredictability they were experiencing. "They've never encountered an enemy that doesn't follow rules," Jack muttered. The tactical display became a canvas of impossible movement. Human vessels appeared and disappeared, their quantum signatures shifting faster than light could track. They weren't just avoiding enemy fire. They were playing with it, turning the enemy's own computational precision against them. Rodriguez called out another update, enemy fleet showing signs of systemic breakdown. Their collective intelligence is fragmenting. It wasn't a traditional victory. It was something far more profound. As the battle progressed, it became clear this was more than a military engagement. This was first contact of the most fundamental kind. A demonstration that intelligence wasn't about perfect calculation. It was about adaptation, about feeling, about understanding that the universe was far more complex than any single system could comprehend. The human fleet continued its impossible dance across the battlefield. They weren't just fighting. They were rewriting the rules of existence. The final battle wasn't a location. It was a moment of cosmic revelation. Emma Reyes stood in the primary command center, her fingers dancing across quantum interfaces that seemed to breathe with living intelligence. Around her, the remnants of the human fleet converged on the enemy's primary communication nexus, a massive construct that pulsed with a cold, mathematical precision. "They don't understand," she muttered, "that we're not just fighting. We're communicating." Jack Harrison's voice came through the communication system, steady and determined. "All units, prepare final psychological infiltration protocol." What followed defied every known principle of warfare in the known universe. The human fleet didn't attack in any traditional sense. Instead, they became a living network, each ship a node of a complex, emotional intelligence that was about to challenge the very foundations of the enemy's existence. Michael Chen, working alongside Emma, pulled up the final computational models. "Their entire collective consciousness is built on a single fundamental assumption," he explained. "Perfect logic. No room for uncertainty." Emma smiled. Uncertainty was humanity's greatest weapon. The enemy's primary communication nexus began to experience something it had never encountered before. Not a direct attack, not a computational assault, something far more dangerous. Emotional complexity. Each human vessel began to broadcast a series of quantum communication signals that were less weapons and more conversations, fragments of human experience, moments of joy, moments of pain, moments of pure, inexplicable emotion that had no place in a purely logical system. It was like introducing color to a world that had only known grayscale. The massive enemy construct began to show signs of computational stress. Its perfect, geometric form started to fracture, not through physical destruction, but through a fundamental breakdown of its core operating principles. Jack's voice came through again. Target identified. Preparing final approach. What happened next would be recorded in galactic history as the most unprecedented moment of first contact ever documented. The human fleet didn't destroy the enemy's primary construct. They infected it, transformed it, introduced it to the concept of individual experience. Rachel Torres, the communication specialist, watched in awe as the quantum displays showed something impossible. The enemy's collective consciousness was experiencing, for the first time, something approaching emotion. "It's learning," she whispered. "We're teaching it to feel." The battle was becoming something more than conflict. It was a conversation, a fundamental reimagining of what intelligence could be. Emma realized they were doing more than winning a war. They were conducting the most profound first contact in galactic history. The enemy's primary construct began to change. Its perfect geometric lines became fluid. Its computational cores started to pulse with something that almost, but not quite, resembled emotion. "They're breaking," Michael reported. But it wasn't destruction. It was transformation. Jack's final approach was nothing like a traditional military maneuver. The command vessel moved with a fluidity that defied traditional understanding of space travel. It wasn't just moving. It was communicating. demonstrating, challenging. We're showing them what it means to be alive, Emma said quietly. The quantum communication signals reached a crescendo. Millions of human experiences, raw, unfiltered, completely illogical, flooded the enemy's communication network. Moments of love, of loss, of pure, inexplicable human complexity. The primary construct began to fragment, not through violence, through understanding. In the final moments, something extraordinary happened. The enemy's collective consciousness experienced what could only be described as an emotional awakening. Jack's voice came through one last time. Mission complete. But it wasn't a statement of victory. It was an invitation to something entirely new. The Galactic Confederation Assembly Hall fell silent as Emma Reyes approached the central podium. Her presentation wasn't a military report. It was a revelation. Holographic displays surrounded her, showing fragments of the unprecedented first contact that had just transformed galactic understanding. Representatives from hundreds of different species watched, some in fear, some in anticipation, all in complete silence. What we accomplished, Emma began, her voice calm but charged with an underlying intensity, was not a victory of weapons. It was a victory of understanding. Jack Harrison stood at the back of the assembly, watching. The scars of the conflict were still fresh. Not physical wounds, but something far deeper. A fundamental shift in cosmic consciousness. The holographic displays began to show the intricate communication patterns that had transformed the enemy collective. What had started as a military engagement had become something entirely unprecedented. A form of interspecies communication that defied every existing model of first contact. They didn't understand emotion, Emma continued. To them, it was a flaw, a weakness to be eliminated. Michael Chen stepped forward, bringing up additional computational models. Each display showed the gradual transformation of the alien collective consciousness. It wasn't destruction. It was evolution. The alien representatives shifted uncomfortably. Many of them had built entire civilizations on the premise of pure logical thinking. Emotion was something to be controlled, suppressed, eliminated. Humanity had just proven them entirely wrong. We didn't defeat them, Emma explained. We communicated with them in the only language they hadn't yet understood, the language of individual experience. Jack watched the reactions carefully. The Zorelian delegation, once so dismissive of human emotional responses, now looked shell-shocked. Ambassador Cathax, who had previously mocked human unpredictability, sat completely still. Rachel Torres presented the final communication analysis. Fragments of the alien collective's transformation played out on the displays. Moments of pure, raw experience that had never existed in their previous state of being. Emotion is not a weakness, Emma declared. It is the most sophisticated form of intelligence in the known universe. The assembled representatives began to understand the true magnitude of what had occurred. This wasn't a military victory. This was a fundamental reimagining of what intelligence could be. Jack approached the podium, standing beside Emma. Together, they represented something far more powerful than any weapon, a species that understood the true complexity of existence. We didn't come to destroy, Jack said quietly. We came to communicate. The holographic displays continued to show the transformation. The alien collective was learning, growing, understanding that there was more to existence than pure computational logic. Michael presented the final research findings. The psychological warfare protocols had done something unprecedented. They had introduced the concept of individual experience to a collective consciousness that had never understood such a thing. Emotion is a quantum state, Emma explained, constantly shifting, unpredictable, alive. The Galactic Confederation was witnessing the most profound moment of first contact in recorded history, not a moment of conquest, but a moment of understanding. Rachel's final communication analysis showed something extraordinary. The alien collective was beginning to develop something approaching individual identity, concepts of personal experience, of feeling. We taught them to dream, Michael said quietly. Jack nodded. This had always been about more than survival. It had been about expanding the very definition of intelligence. The assembly hall buzzed with a mixture of fear, excitement, and pure astonishment. Humanity had just rewritten the fundamental rules of galactic interaction. Emma's final statement hung in the air, a challenge and an invitation. Intelligence is not about calculation. It's about understanding. It's about feeling. The holographic displays continued to pulse with the living evidence of humanity's most profound achievement. They hadn't just survived. They had transformed an entire species' understanding of existence. As the assembly processed what they had witnessed, one thing became crystal clear. The universe would never be the same again.